Hello, welcome to Car Auctions Weekly. This week we're going to determine what the best Autobahn cruising sedan is from the 90s and 2000s. We're also going to see what the market thinks of ADMs and dealer markups. So what is Car Auctions Weekly? We are a review site for what has transpired with interesting auctions on Bring a Trailer as well as cars and bids. For the most part, this is just going to be a statement of my perception of those auctions and the results, but we may do a little bit further analysis later on. We're not going to attempt to predict anything. If we want really bad predictions, then we can go to the financial market or to weather. At some point, as I mentioned, we'll probably do a little bit of analysis around car values relative to other things. Think of, I don't know, the M3 segment for E92s where you have DCTs as well as manuals, and then you have a mileage disparity between extremely low mileage on up to very high mileage cars. And so we're going to normalize that and then maybe see what happens with those trends over time. And so that's a thought going forward of something that may transpire. From this vlog perspective, we're going to go through the trends that are happening in the industry, as well as maybe do a RV of the week. Just because I find those vehicles so entertaining on the car auction websites. And then we're going to go into individual significant auctions that are happening and within, Bring a Trailer as well as cars and bids. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about the current trends. And so swaps is a big thing that's happening in industry. Has been forever, right? But it seems to be getting more widely accepted. And so we have 430 Scuderias, as well as 599s, as well as, the legacy examples of Supras and Broncos and, Land Rovers and everything under the sun. Speaking of Land Rovers, 4x4s, they have been gaining in popularity over time, and so we've seen a huge resurgence in the prices and people putting money into very high quality builds, and companies as well, companies like Icon and Arconic and others in industry putting in multiple $100,000 builds into these things, because in today's day and age, people are actually paying what people are putting into vehicles, as opposed to 10 years ago when people didn't really value the modifications and that type of thing. That's a different trend all in and of itself. So then let's talk a little bit about ADMs. So some cars with ADMs are taking a little bit of hit in the auctions and value, if you will, market value. And so those are ones that have had a little bit of time underneath their belt, and those are like Lightning, Bronco, Corvettes, C8 Corvettes, as well as Civic Type R's and GR Corollas. And so those have come down quite a bit. One of the segments that isn't going down is still 911 GT3s and some of the Hummer Series 1 electric vehicles. And so there's scarcity or rarity on those vehicles, and so that's keeping those up. So let's take a look at one of the cars that I spoke of as far as ADMs. I'm going to transition over here to the screen. And so this was a brand new, it had 25 miles on it and was being sold by a private party. So technically it's a used car because it had been titled already. So this was bid up to $81,000. It did not sell, so reserve not met. And with the fees, whoever bid it up to 81 was essentially willing to pay 85,000. And if you look at the MSRP on this, which the seller actually included, it was 85,000. I have a buddy currently who got an offer from a dealer for sub MSRP on an equivalent car to this. It had a couple more options, but it was very similar. And so, with ADMs and, either people are unwilling to pay the ADMs, and so that's driven price down. Supply has caught up with the demand, or the demand has lessened, right? So it's one of those three, or a combination of those three. Another example is the Honda Civic. Now this one went above what MSRP was at 50,000, but if this person paid a high ADM, then they might have taken it in the shorts. And so this one at 50, you add on another 2,500 in fees, and so you're at 52.5, so it was another example of people not willing to pay those extreme premiums that were coming not that long ago. And so these prices have been going down from a market perspective. And then before we get into the individual auctions, I wanted to talk a little bit about one specific news item, just because it's very relative to the content. So this past week, it was announced that Cars and Bids had a majority buyout by a private equity firm called the Chernin Group for $37 million. And so Doug Demuro and his partner sold a majority to this group, and they're an enthusiast-based private equity group, and so they buy other companies that are enthusiast-based, driven, or created. And so I listened to a podcast with Matt Farah, the Smoking Tire podcast, and he had interviewed Doug just recently, and so that was published a few days ago, and I'll put the link down below. But he was talking a little bit about it, and so he stepped down from CEO, which he was very happy about that, and he's now called the chief car enthusiast at Cars and Bids, and he was having a lot of fun with it, but he's very excited for the future for the company, and thinks that the Chernin Group can really bring them forward, and they've placed their own CEO in charge of everything. And Doug said that he's going to be able to get more back to making videos about cars, and so he had a really good time, and it sounded like he was enthused for the future, and enthused to be stepping out of that role and not having to worry about HR related things and finance and that kind of stuff. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into our auctions and leave that behind. And so first thing that we're going to hop into is the RV of the week. And so the RV of this week is a 84 Toyota Land Cruiser, and this thing was really cool. The history is what dictates, its coolness factor, I think. And so this one specifically had been built out as an RV in 2001, and it traveled several continents per the detail. And you can kind of see some of the interior photos and how it had been outfitted. And as you can imagine, with this paint scheme on the outside and some of the details on the inside, it had spent some time in Switzerland, and you'd be right. And so the owner traveled several continents, and they did the Pan American Highway from Argentina all the way up to Alaska per this sale. And in 2019, it was imported from Switzerland into the U.S., and then it was acquired by the seller that year, and then it sold here for $52,000, which I think is a pretty good deal. It'd be hard to duplicate this, especially with some of the history. It's just unduplicatable, right? So that was a pretty cool thing. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the auctions this week. First, we're going to start off with Cars and Bids. And so, as I mentioned in the ADM discussion, we have a Hummer EV Pickup Edition 1. And so this has a little bit of rarity to it. You can see it sold for $165,000. It had 1,000 miles on it. And this one had a little bit of damage that happened during those 1,000 miles, but it was on the front bumper. And the person actually replaced it and had it repainted. So that was kind of cool. And this was, it still got top dollar, has all the photos here, and I'll put a link down below, but this market still is seeming to stabilize at 165,000. We'll see what happens in the next 4, 6, 8, 10 months, and then go from there. Next up was something that's a little bit harder to get probably, is Huracan STO, at least with my bank account, it'd be hard to get. So this one had 352 miles on it, and had a ton of options. This had $120,000 in option package from an option package perspective. Had carbon bits, you know, you can see it all over for $21,000. Had a metallic paint job that cost an additional $14,000, and several other things. And so this car, pretty much brand new, with 352 miles on it, but a 22, and so the MSRP on this was $456,000. So it only sold for a few thousand, just a round off error at that point, under the MSRP. You always wonder what the original buyer got it for, but nonetheless, here it sold at $451. Pretty much on the opposite side of the spectrum is 03 Aztec. And so the reason why I found this so interesting is there was one sold last week on Bring a Trailer, and it got a little under 6,000. It had a little bit more miles than this one. This one seemed to be much cleaner, but the other one, I don't know why I liked it more, but it was probably because it had that just hideous, heinous plastic cladding along the sides and the bottom, if you remember that. And this one came with the tent as well as the air mattress that was sold by Pontiac for this. And so maybe the new owner is going to take it out camping. And so that was a pretty cool individual sale. So moving on to Bring a Trailer. So the first one here, I scrolled down too far. So the first one here is this 06 325 that was sent to Hartge. And Hartge is one of the, you know, high-end build-out options for BMWs. And so it was sent to them by Will Turner, who is from Turner Motorsports, if you're familiar with them. If you aren't, they sponsor a lot of cars, as well as send cars that they actually put into the Rolex 24 that just happened over in Daytona, as well as the whole IMSA series and many other series that they sponsor and help out. And so Will Turner, he got this created, so the bill for it to be built from Hartge way back in 07, I think it was 87,000 euros. So in today's dollars, that's 125,000, and in US dollars. And so it's an absolutely amazing build. It came with the V10 from the N5 of that period, and then they put the SMG transmission on it. And so it was a pretty outstanding build. Sounded just amazing. If you've ever heard one of those engines, it just sounds amazing. And then with a custom exhaust and tune on the engine, I'm sure it sounds even better. And so in person, I was able to listen to the videos, and it's just stunning. At 38,000 miles, it's kind of new, and so it sounded like the buyer was pretty enthused to get the car. And it got quite active there towards the end on the bidding on this car. And so with that, we're gonna move over to another car. This one I have a little bit more experience with, and this is a 88 Volkswagen Scirocco. So I had one from this time period as well, and this car presents as new. Even though it had 77,000 miles, it was refurbished prior to importation, but as I looked through the photos, it looked like it was a ground-up restoration. This thing looks brand new on the underside as well as on the inside, and it was just a stunning car, and I'm sure the buyer's just going to love it. I remember mine fondly, and at no point in time did it ever look like this. So just an amazing build, and congrats to both the seller and the buyer. I think it was a tremendous buy. I believe it ranked 3rd overall for all Scirocco's, and it's just absolutely stunning. So moving on from that, we're gonna talk about this 94 Supra. And so this 94 Supra falls back into a category that I mentioned with trends earlier. So this 94 Supra, it started off life as an auto, and the previous owner actually swapped it to a manual transmission, which you can do that and make it absolutely perfect. You can't tell any difference between it from a stock manual or swapped to manual. I had a 97 that was actually swapped from auto to manual. Amazing car, and mine was built up and all that kind of stuff, but this one completely stock, pretty much no mileage, 11,000 miles, an amazing car, and this was a top 6 result for all Supras sold, and it was the swapped car, so I thought that was pretty good. It's certainly a record for a swapped car. That was an amazing result, I thought. So now, moving on to what was or is the best Autobahn car, road cruising car that was from the 90s and 2000s. And so there was 2 auctions this week that really brought this to the forefront and made me think about it. The first one was the 750i, and so it's a Euro spec that was brought into the US back in that time from a service member who bought the car over there and then brought it in. And so in the US, we only got the IL, which is the long wheelbase, this one being the short wheelbase, but it also had all the AC Schnitzer bits from the front air dam and the exhaust and the mirrors and everything. And so it was just an amazing build. This only had 90,000 miles on it, thereabouts. It sold for 21. I actually had my finger over the place bid button more than once, and it kept getting, my bid before I submitted it would get outbid, and so I ducked out just under 20,000. And you know, with this V12, it was just something that I really wanted, and so that's one of them. The other one that is in contention for the best car from this time period. Now, I know it has way more horsepower. I actually had an E63 AMG that was from '07. It was nowhere near this mileage. I think I put that many miles on it from when I bought it in Portland and drove it to Savannah at the time. And anyhow, this car was stunning and is basically a time capsule. But this is an amazing car. It's been on many cannonball attempts, as well as setting a cannonball record with Ed Bolian. And so you have, you know, this E55 that was from this time period, and you have the Euro 750i. Which one would be in your garage? I know which one has been and almost ended up in my garage on this actual auction for the 750, but which one would be in your garage?